Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. As promised a couple of weeks ago, that we will discuss a series of tutorials that will talk about how to create a secure web application that uses JWT token and with various technologies, of course. So today is kind of like the first video of that series. What we'll try to do today is we'll try to create a client and a server, and the client and server, both of them will be running on Node.js. The server will be using Express.js for the server, and the client we will do Angular. And let's see how that's all going to work. And of course, in the backend, we're going to use a database. The database will be simple document-based database. It's going to be NoSQL database, and it will be MongoDB, and it is free online, so there's no purchase necessary. You should be able to follow it. Now, if you're not familiar with my channel, I really suggest that you go through some of the videos that I make, especially the last video that I made. So if you click on the list of videos from my channel, you end up in here. And in there, take a look at this video. This was the last video that I made, as you can see, a couple of weeks ago. In this video, I talk about exactly what the application will look like, what are the various technologies that you can literally plug and play with it once I'll be done with the whole entire series. So that's basically the idea, and I hope after today's tutorial we'll be able to learn a little bit about the Node.js, AngularJS, Express.js, JWT, and some of MongoDB as well. So let's get to it. If you have not watched the video, that's also probably okay, because I'll do my best to make this tutorial in such a way so that it's not really dependent on this. However, it will always help if you watch this, as you will know the exact context of this entire tutorial. Okay, let's get to it. The first thing that you wanted to download is Node.js, of course, because we are dealing with JavaScript on the server side, so you're going to need Node.js. Download that and install it, of course. The next thing is, again, this is not a requirement, but I will be actually using this IDE, Visual Studio Code, to show you the code of client and the server, both in Angular and also in Node.js. Therefore, if you want to follow along, please do download this tool. It's free, so it won't cost you a dime, but you'll be able to follow along. Okay, so the next thing is, once you have these two tools installed after downloading, you wanted to create an account in MongoDB, right? And if you already have it, you can pretty much just relax and sit tight, because we're going to get through it pretty quick. If you don't know what this is, of course, I'll put all these links in the description below, and also it will be in the GitHub link that I will also put in the description below. So go to this link and try it free. You don't have to buy anything, don't have to put your card. You just get like the basic version or basic service for the MongoDB, which is absolutely fine for this tutorial. So go ahead, register, log in, create an account. And once you have that account, once you log in, you will see something like this. So this is basically giving you the information on if you have any database, what's the name of your database that you created, and how can you connect, and how can you monitor. And then, of course, the links that you're interested in is the connect and the browse collections, right? When you click on connect, what happens is it will give you an information on how to connect to this database from your code, because that is very important and you need that string. So go ahead, click on this, and it will look something like that. As you can see, it's going to have MongoDB plus SRV : / and your username, some password, and then you have the database and all this. So you need that information. You can use this to copy it. Right? Once you're done, save it, because you're going to have to create an environment variable. So once you have the connection information noted, then go ahead, click on this browse collection. This is basically where you would have your list of database that you'd create. Of course, I already have a whole bunch of them, so I already created some. In your case, you would be creating by using this little button right here, create database, and name it whatever you want. I called it based on ICS Discover, so that's the name. But you can call it whatever you want. You can call it, MyDB, my new database. But whatever you call it, make sure you remember that name, because we're going to need that for another environment variable as well. Then inside that, you need to create what they say is a collection, right? So this is a collection, and this is the database. So you basically have a collection inside a database. So if you're from an RDBMS background, basically relational databases, this is actually going to be very simple. So the collections are kind of like tables in a way, and this is kind of like a schema. So you would be clicking on this, and as you can see that the database name, make sure whatever you put, you need to remember that. Collection name, make sure you call it users, because that's how all the code are referenced. So this one has to be users, that one you can call it whatever you want. And of course, you can leave the rest of them default and just hit create. So I already have done that, and that's what this is. And you don't really have to create any data. You can, if you want to, by clicking on this insert document. That's basically saying document is kind of like inserting data. That's what this is, okay? But you don't have to do anything. You could do it through the application as well, okay? That's absolutely fine. So this is the minimum step that you would need to create the database. Now, in case you forgot to copy the connections, you also have the options to click on this command line tools. If you click on this, this will also show you another link that basically will give you something like this, connect instructions. So if you click on this, that also will give you the same information, how to connect. So there's two things that you need to remember, right? One is that you need to remember the connection information, and you need to remember the name of the database. Okay, let's go to the next step. In the next step, you would need to store those information into an environment variable. Of course, depending on the platform, it may differ. I'm on Windows, so I'll show you how to set an environment variable on Windows. You could do it from the command line if you want to, but you just need to make sure that you have to run your server from that exact same command line if you just do a set of the environment variable. But I would typically like to do this thing globally, so just set it once and I don't have to worry about it. One way to do it on Windows, you could just go to your search, type env, environment variable. And once you start typing it, you will get something like this. So what you need to do is just click on this. Once you click on that edit system environment variable, you will get something like this, system properties. And then just click on this environment variable. That will bring this dialog box where you have two sections, users and system. I typically like to put stuff in the system environment variable. And you would like to set these two environment variables right here, as you can see. User management MongoDB, that would be the name of the database. And user management Mongo URI, that would be the entire connection information, right? The way you add it, you can just click on new and then add it, right? So as simple as that. Of course, once you are done, make sure you click on OK here and then OK there, just to set it for the entire environment. Once you have the environment variable set up, the next step is to get the code. So you would be able to get the code from this GitHub URL. So copy that. I will put this link in the description below of the YouTube video. Then open your command prompt that you like and go to the directory that you wanted to get the code and make sure you launch this command, git space clone space, of course, the URL of that code. And hit enter. I have already done that, so I'm not doing that. And once you do it, you should have the code in there in the directory. So then you should be able to do like something like this, right? And then you would be in that directory. So let's take a look at the directory, how it looks. So the directory will look something like this. You will have two main subdirectories. One is server and one is client. As you can tell, the client will have your client code, server will have your server code. Now, since this is a series of tutorials, today we're only talking about Angular client and Express.js server. So your server will have another subfolder where you will have the Express.js code in there, in the subdirectory. And your client will have another subdirectory called Angular. That's where you will have your Angular code. So the next thing to do would be to bring up your Visual Studio Code so that you can look at the code or edit the code or compile the code. If you're not familiar with the Visual Studio Code, after you install it, the way to bring it up very simply is go to the directory where you have your code and just type code and space and dot, and that will bring it up. I have already brought it up, so I'm not going to do it again. Once you bring out the Visual Studio Code, this is how it will look like. It will literally show you all the files and folders in there. Now, I have already brought it up, so I have all this. I also have some extra stuff that you see here. I basically opened Terminal, right? Because I wanted to run all those codes inside the Visual Studio Code. The way you do it is you click on this dot, 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 and there's Terminal, and you just basically say New Terminal, right? Once your terminal comes up, typically by default, depending on how it's set up, it may bring up a PowerShell. That's why you see PowerShell here. But you are absolutely okay to change it. I like the command prompt, so you can kind of click on here again, and you can just click on command prompt, and you can get as many as you want. So that's how I got, you can see 2 separate command prompts, right? In this command prompt, I have the client. In this command prompt, I went to the server. So as you can see in this command prompt, I already went to, like, change directory to client, change directory to Angular. So I'm on the right directory so that I can compile the code and run it. Same thing for the server. This is the server command line, and I went to do the CD server, so I went to the server directory. This is all under that user management code that I just checked out. And then after that, I went to the Express JWT MongoDB. That's where I have all of my code. So the next thing I want to do is, and that's the same thing I want to do, just to run it to make sure everything is working. Now, this makes sure that you do this step after you set up all of your environment variable, because this code will rely on that you have your MongoDB server set up and in the environment variable, and also you have your schema set properly, right? How do I know that? So this is one way to check it. So if I just say set user underscore, and I could see these are the entries of my environment variable that I have it set. So you could do the same check to make sure that you have these things set properly. Once you have the environment variable checked, then what you want to do is go here and compile the code. So run npm install. And mine will be pretty quick because I've already done that, but yours may take some time. So let it run. If you install the node properly, you should be able to run this thing as well, and it should be successful. Then you go to the client prompt and do the same thing, npm install. And mine will be fast. You may be a little bit slower for the first time because I've already done this. That's why it's fast. Now you want to go to the server one first. Actually, it doesn't matter which way you do it, but I typically like to do the server. And all you have to do is very simple, npm start. That basically says go ahead, start the server. And this will start the server, and you will get a message something like this. And I'll come back to the NodeMon. NodeMon is basically a nice auxiliary helpful software that helps you change the code, server-side code, without being able to, like, every time stop and restart. So I can go and change the server code, it will automatically pick it up and restart it for me. So that's why it's very useful. And as you could see, by default, it's listening to the port 8080. That means my server API is basically up and running, and it is basically going to listen to 8080. Okay, the first thing you want to do is, again, you don't have to do it this step, but this is just me. I don't have my client up and running yet, but I got my server up, so my API should be working, right? So you can check that. Now, again, you can use Postman as your tool to check your REST APIs. Postman is great, but I like to use a really thin tool called Rested. It's literally an extension of, like, Firefox that you can install, and it's pretty simple to understand and simple to use as well. So that's what I got here. I got Firefox up, and this is, as you can see, this is Rested Client. That's the name of the extension. So that's what I'm going to use to test my API. Now, of course, in order to test the API, I need to understand the API, right? What is that API doing? What are the endpoints that it is offering, right? So let's get to that first. So let's look at the server-side code a little bit, right? You will see that when you expand the server and express JWT MongoDB subdirectory, there will be 3 main JavaScript code. One is db.js, The other one is server.js and users.js, right? So let's go through each one of them. The db.js, as you could tell, that it's literally dealing with our server stuff, database server stuff. So it is basically getting the required library for MongoDB, then also getting, this is where it gets the URI, if you remember, from the environment variable that you set, right? So that's why it's very important you have this environment variable set. And then, of course, another thing that I actually, again, you don't have to do it this way, but this is just the easiest way that I could think of is I'm literally encoding the URI in base 64, and that becomes my secret key. Because you're going to need the secret key to initialize your session, and you're also going to need your secret key to initialize your JWT token that you're going to create. Because this is, remember, this is going to be a secure API, right? You have your login, and then you get to do certain stuff. So that's what I use this secret key, and that's why I just put it in the database code so that I can export it and I can use it in other places. So that's all this is. It's just exporting all of these. So let's look at the next one. The next one is, let's look at the server. The server is, of course, it's getting all the standard boring stuff, getting the DB stuff, getting the user, and getting this express library. The course is basically, it is like there are a cross-site reference thing that actually happens during an API call. You're basically going to use that, and probably you're going to just ignore that. That's all, because in regular application you don't want to ignore it because you don't want cross-site because forgery. But for API, I think you need to do that, otherwise you're going to have trouble. You'll get issues like forbidden code, like HTTP code. Anyway, and then this is where you're going to use that secret that I was telling you that I got it from the DBA secret key. Is when you initialize your session, you're going to have to use some kind of secret code, and that's what that is. And as you can tell, my session will expire in 15 minutes. So that's what this is. This is in milliseconds. And what are my routers? All the routers are going to be, of course, in the slash. And what is my router's actual code that it's going to use? Is going to use this users.js. So this guy right there. So this guy that's defined right here. So, and then another little thing that is just, this is just standard code of how to start a server. But the main interesting thing here is by default I'm putting the port 8080, but you are welcome to actually start this server script with another value. Like I could say nodemon space server.js space 8081, and it will pick it up from that environment variable, not environment, I'm sorry, from that argument variable, and that could be your port. So again, by default it's 8080, but you can always change it by passing it as an argument. So that's basically the server side code, not too much. It's pretty simple. This is where all the API thing lands. So let's make this a little bit bigger so you can see exactly what's going on. Now, of course, I need the database. I'm of course going to need some stuff from Express. Then here is where I need the JWT JSON Web Token library. This is very important. And I'm using user ID and password. It is recommended to use the bcrypt to actually encrypt your password. Actually, encrypt is the wrong word. Hash your password. So that's what this is, right? And then I get the router. And whenever you use the JWT or bcrypt, there's a salt that you have to pass. By default it's 10, so but you can change it if you want. The higher the salt is, the more time it's going to take to hash it. That's all this is. And it's just standard, the database URI and declaring the client. Remember the secret key that I mentioned, that getting it from by encoding in base 64 from the database URI. And of course this is just an identifier. There is, once a user logs in, they could have either two separate roles. Either they could be part of their user or part of the admin. So this is just an identifier that I'm using. So if the user has the role admin, that means they're administrator. If the user has the role underscore user, they're the user. Okay. So initially, this is just connecting to the database, as you can tell, and I am actually taking care of a logout by expiring my JWT token. So that's what this variable is for. And you'll see that in the logout section. And these are just common functions. So instead of just doing the same thing again and again, I just created some functions. When I'm done with my API, I need to send the status message back to the client. So this is basically the standard status message that's being sent. That's going to have the HTTP status. That's going to have if there's any message and if there's any result that I want it to show in the message. So that's all this is. And then, of course, this is just a common verify user function. It's asynchronous function that all it's doing is every time if an API is secure, you want to make sure that you're verifying the token, right? So that's what this common function is basically doing. It's going to go, as you can see right here, it is getting the token out from the actual header, and then it's going to basically check if the token is invalid. Of course, it's going to throw an exception, right? If it's not invalid, then it's got to decode the token using the JWT library, get the username from there, and then go on, making sure that database is connected and it's going to return the username. So that's very simple, right? And anything that goes wrong is just going to throw not authorized because you can invalidate it. Simple. And then this is just another common function where I'm checking because a lot of these functionality requires to check if the user is an admin or not. So again, I'm dissecting the token a little bit more by getting the username, by also getting if the user is admin or not, right? By going to the database to check their roles. So that's what this is. This is again an extra set of step that I am doing to make the application really secure. Because yes, you're logged in, you got your roles, but someone could spook your JWT token, let's say hack it or whatever, and even though they're a user, but they may pretend to be an admin by sending a token that kind of looks like an admin. So what's happening here is I'm getting the token, I'm making sure that user, I'm not relying on the token, that user has administrative access. So that's what this is. So it is checking from the server side to make sure that it is rock solid, the security is rock solid. All right, and this is again just another method that just gets the JWT token, and it's probably only being used once. And as you can see that when you get a JWT token, you can actually have some claims, right? What are the things that you wanted to kind of like encrypt inside the token, right? I put the username, that's one of this thing, and of course I have also put, as you can see, the session secret. So these are the two things that I have put in that JWT token, and that's how I'm signing this thing. And then of course it actually uses that secret key that I told you to do all this encryption set that don't want that the hacker wouldn't know, right? And of course the token expires in 1 hour, right? And that can be changed. So the secret, as you could see, it is just I'm just adding up a whole bunch of stuff, the session ID with the username and the password to basically get a session secret. So that could be anything. But typically you want something that is pretty ugly and it's hard to encrypt or hard to understand, right? All right, the very first thing is this is the standard time log that I'm doing. Don't worry about that. Okay, so this is where the starting of the API. As you can see, you look at the comment, it says define the login route. So that is the very first thing I wanted to go and check, right? So let's go ahead and copy that guy, and I'm going to go to my rested API. I already have. The nice thing about rested is you can actually save the collections, whatever stuff that you did, just like Postman, and you could remember these things. So the first thing I want to do is I want to do this auth login, right? Because remember that this is going to be localhost 8080 auth and login. So that is the URI. That's right here. Right? And there are others that we're going to come to it, but this is the URI for the login. And the things that it requires is, of course, it will require a username and it will require a password, right? As simple as that. There's username and it checks for the password, right? You can tell right here by request body username and request body password. So, of course, I need to put a username and I need to put a password. Well, these are not actually valid username and valid password. I'm just going to put a valid username and a valid password that I know should work. And this is literally going to go to the database. And by database, I mean just a MongoDB, to all that connection through the internet, and verify and give you a JWT token. And that's pretty important. Basically, it's telling me, yes, you are authorized to log in. There's nothing else that I have in here, right, other than just this. So I'm just going to go ahead and try to send the request. And as you can see, voila, it did work. It's a success, and there is a status, and there is all the information that I got. That this is the username, this is the first name, that's the last name, and I am an admin. And make sure you grab that token because that's pretty important. You're going to need that token. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. So let's see what's happening, right? Once you go to the auth login, of course, by default, this is basically saying user not found. It's a standard message that we're starting with, but it's not being sent yet. We are connecting to the database. Then we are trying to find if that user exists in the database based on the username that we got from the form, right? If the user is not null, that means we found a user at least. Then the next thing is we got to make sure that the password that they send is the correct password for the user before we set an authentication JWT token, right? That's exactly what this is doing. So this is basically saying, remember, we're using bcrypt for the hashing. This is the method that we are supposed to use that compares the actual password with the hashed version, right? So this is the password we're getting from the actual request, which is getting exactly from the form, and this is the hashed password that we got from the database right here, as you can see. It's comparing those two and making sure that they match. If they don't match, it's going to go to the else. It's going to throw the user not found message because we can't let the user continue, right? If it's all good, sending it to 200, message is success, and then what are we sending in the result? In the result, we're sending a token, right? This is basically the token header, or like the result that we're sending, that will be sending a JWT token, right? And it's also sending other information. This is kind of like this is sent in a JSON format, as you can tell. So the token would be this, username would be this, first name would be that, last name would be that, and so on, right? So authorities are those. So we are literally sending this as part of the response body, right? So that's what that is. And then of course the send, as I was showing you in the past, that this send is just a common method, as you can see. It just basically does a respond.send, right? It just sends the response body back to the client. So that's all this is saying. It's just sending it, and it's all nice and good. Anything else, it's an error message. Anything else, exception, it's an error message. It's sending an error message with the 500. So that's all it's doing. Okay. So now let's go to the next one. So this one is basically saying that get the list of users. If you look at this route, so this is a get method, of course, and HTTP, and it's /users. And as you could see that, hey, get from the users collection, get everyone, right? And then put it into an array, and that's what's being returned, the entire result. So all the users are being returned in as an array in this result. If it's successful, because if anything goes wrong, of course you get a 500. So let's see if that works. So again, we're going to go back to our nice listed client. Here's the client, right? So we're going to try the get now. I already have the URL. So there's the get request, and this is the URI. If you could Remember, that's just slash users and get, right? That's exactly what we got. Let's just see if the request works, right? I'm sending it and look at what it says. It says status 500 not authorized, right? So that's exactly what I'm supposed to see, right? And let's go to the code to see exactly what's going on. So this is being called, and look, the very first thing we do is verify user, right? And if you actually go look at the verify user, it is checking the token first, right? It's basically saying, look, is that a valid token? Has that token expired? And I had that old token in there actually in that get that I had saved. So that's why it's basically saying it's not a valid token. So it's throwing up, right? So it is absolutely working the way it is supposed to, right? So let's go back and put a good token. And let's see how that works. So where do I put the token? What you want to do is if you expand this header right here, again, same URI, same get, and here you want it to say authorization. It's a bearer token. And this is where the token goes. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe this guy out and put my new token. And let's send the request now. And look at that. It is good. So I'm getting data. It says fetch successfully status 200, right? So as you could see, so this works fine as expected. Moving on, so let's look at the next one. So next one is you can look at a specific user. So we can go ahead and look at specific user. It's a get method, and all you got to do is put an ID there, right? So we could do that. So let's go back. This user exists 869, and this is the URI that URL that I'm supposed to send. If you look at the code, it's basically saying slash user slash variable ID. That's what I'm going to send, and of course I have to make sure that I send the right bearer token. This is the right token, and I click send, and voila, there is the user information. It was able to fetch successfully, only one user, as you could tell. So I think you got the idea that how this thing is working. So I'm not going to go through the boring task of trying other APIs. So it's basically the next one. As you could see that this is for adding, and it's doing a post. This is for updating, right? That's doing a put, and of course you got to delete, right? So all of these things should work, and all of these things are doing a verify user. That means it is going to stop the user if they're not valid. And some of this thing you could see that I am calling this isAdmin function because deleting a user is only available to the administrators. So if they're not admin, they cannot see it, right? So that's another thing that is there that is added. And then the only other thing I'm going to talk about now is the logout. The logout is a little interesting. If you look at the logout, that also in auth URL prefix, one of the things it's doing is the right way to do the JWT token logout is you're supposed to keep track of a list of token that's supposed to be completely expired and invalid, and that's what it's doing. First, it's validating the token, making sure it's a valid token. If it's not a valid token, of course, we don't need to log out. We're all good. But if it's a valid token, then it is getting the token, and all it's doing, if you remember at the top of our file here, we had a variable expired token that was literally a list. So this is the list where we're keeping track of and checking, look, this is going to be put into the expired token, right? So that's exactly what this is doing. So in case before any server restart, if someone tries to use the token, it is going to check against that expired list of token and say it is not valid, so I'm not going to let you in. And then of course one other thing it's doing, it's of course closing the database as well. And then it says user logged out successfully. Now where does it actually use this expired token? Let's look at the previous common function called verify user, right? In verify user or in the checking of an admin, it's not only checking the token, it's also checking, look, is this token inside an expired token list? If it is, then these are not authorized. So that's how the logout is working. Okay, so that's about it for today because I think it's almost more than 30 minutes. In the next lecture, in the next video tutorial, we will be actually now going through the client code, the Angular code, to show you exactly how each of these APIs with JWT token is used. However, before I finish this tutorial, I just wanted to go quickly and show you what's coming. So if I go back to my client and I run npm start, that will literally start my Angular client. So this Angular client will now be using the API that I was just showing you manually, how to, fetch data, how to log in. So let's just take a look at quickly how this application is working. After starting the server, once you launch the application, it will look something like this. As you could see, there is a login screen. And of course, I'm going to log in using this user ID password. And voila, it is actually in the background, literally using that auth login and getting those tokens. And of course, the rest of the operations are adding or editing, deleting, logging out, they are all using those API. That's all for today. If this tutorial has added any benefit to your skill set, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and also hit that bell icon so that you get notified with the subsequent tutorials. So the next time, what I'm going to talk about is the detailed coding that's involved in this Angular interface that is interfacing with that Express.js server. So in short, we talked about this entire flow today, right? You would download the Node.js, then you would register the MongoDB site, and then create a user's collections. Then of course you can have to download the Visual Studio Code or any other ID that you want to use with this JavaScript code. Then check out the code from the JIT, as I will put the link in the description below. And then of course locate the Angular client, compile, build, and run. That's basically done by npm install and npm start. Pretty simple. Same thing, locate the server directory, compile, build, and run. Same thing, you're going to do npm install and npm start. And of course you could definitely monitor what's going on the server. And today we actually did the API test and API checks and see how that API is working with the JWT token. We also kind of just touch base that we launched the client, Angular client, just to show you how the application comes up and logs in. But in the next tutorial, we will go in details about how the Angular code is interacting with this API. That's all for today. Thanks again. Bye now. Do not forget to subscribe and also hit that bell icon.